Good morning, Vivian, and good morning to our viewers from the United States. Good afternoon to everyone on this side of the ocean in Vienna and around Europe. My name is Mirjana Tomic. I'm a former journalist and I work for Forum Journalismus und Medienwien and Presseclub Concordia here in Vienna. And we organize customized seminars for journalists and for academics. Before I introduce our topic and our speaker, I would like Daniela Kraus to greet in the name of Presseclub Concordia and the organizers.
Good morning, Vivian. Good afternoon, Mirjana. Hello, everybody. Great to see you again. And thank you, Vivian, for telling us about the context of what is going on in China. It's very important for all of us. This again is part of the series of context seminars and talks and conversations, which are organized by Presseclub Concordia here in Vienna and Forum for Journalism and Media, also in Vienna. And the seminars are authored by Mirjana Tomic, whom you heard earlier, and I think everybody knows her because she built up an excellent network between media and academia on several international topics. And I hope to see you again. And my part is to say thank you again, Vivian. Thank you, Mirjana. And I'm really looking forward to learn more about what's going on in China.
Thank you so much, Daniela. We have done this, we have decided, Daniela and I, to do this seminar on very short term because the topic is very important. The recent protests in China came as a surprise for many of us who are not China experts, but do know how important this country is. As usual, articles and analysis have proliferated in media around the world, speculating on the importance of this protest right after the Communist Party Congress confirmed the third term of the Chinese President Xi. I have asked Vivian to explain to us the context and the background seen from the Chinese angle. Vivian has already been our speaker, and I would just like to say a few words about her. Vivian is an award-winning journalist and entrepreneur. She's a former news editor, BBC Chinese, Hong Kong bureau chief, BBC World Service. She is the founder of Mighty Voices LLC. With 20 years experience in both Chinese and English media worlds, Wu has reported for the Central China TV, South China Morning Post, the Initium Media, and the Portrait magazine, among others. Originally, and now you will excuse my poor pronunciation, from Lanzhou, Gansu province, People's Republic of China, Vivian Wu holds a BA in English and Literature from Renmin University of China, MA in International Communication from Beijing University, and an MA in Political Science from New York, the New School in New York. In summer 2022, that is several months ago, she moved from Hong Kong to New York to start her new own media company. As all of our events, or most of them, we want to focus on understanding the local context. And as I said, this is not about geopolitics. This is about understanding the Chinese angle. We learned that the protests were spontaneous and they were a result of these very prolonged anti-COVID policies that have been very, very strict in China. But I would like Vivian to explain to us, were you surprised when they started? Were you surprised how people started asking for democracy, not only for looser COVID measures? Were you surprised that people actually ventured in the street, considering how prevalent is the surveillance system in China, especially in the big cities? Vivian, the screen is yours, please.
Okay, first, thank you. Thank you, all my friends out there in Vienna. Once again, bringing me to back to this community and to share my thoughts. I'm very glad and honored. And of course, I just try to go back to your questions. I think the whole world has watched all the videos, and a lot of clips are still coming up. You asked me, were I surprised? Yes, I was, but not that shocked for two reasons. If you watch China for long enough, you understand the society is very diverse. That means you cannot really expect what's going on among people because of the censorship, because of the silenced media. I mean, when we say media, it's about the traditional institutional media and also the social media. And the social media is closely watched, but still people, everybody has mobile phone. Everybody has multiple platforms that share their thoughts, share videos, share information among themselves publicly. And there's a partial censorship. But my point is, after watching so many years on the social media and talking to people and live there and as a fellow Chinese, I understand a lot of thoughts, a lot of diverse discussions going on. During the past 3 years, we see what happened in China is like the whole society is suffering. The whole society is suffering the zero COVID policy. That means the consequence of this totally irrational, unreasonable policy that shut the whole society down, the consequence is massive. It's larger scale than everybody outside China could feel and understand.
Could you give us a few examples?
Yeah. Let me follow. Let me finish my logic first here. So the thing is, like, if a society is controlled so tightly in a crazy way, some extreme things will happen. We never know. So it's like people, when they are desperate, they will take whatever actions to express themselves, maybe just for the very basic needs. So let's look at this timeline. When the protest took place in many cities, from Shanghai, from Shanghai to Beijing to Chengdu to Guangzhou. Guangzhou actually was the earliest, but before Guangzhou, there was Chongqing. Chongqing was in Sichuan area. People there are known for being, have great temper to speak up. And the Beijing people are known for good at reasoning. And Shanghai is a city that has been suffering months of shutdown. And Guangzhou, we see, is a very commercial city, but hundreds, thousands, millions people were shut down. But before this recent shutdown control policy, actually, a lot of people have lost their job over the past 3 years. Okay, I'll give you more examples to show why this is a bigger context you could bear in mind. It's like, okay, I'll give you the bigger context later, but before this whole number of protests took place, what's happened? It's in Xinjiang region, Urumqi, that's the capital city of Xinjiang province, if we say in Chinese way. There's a residence building. There was a big fire took place. It's just the fire started because a home apartment has some small fire. It's not supposed to develop into such a big disaster that killed 10 people. People couldn't get out of their home because they were shut down in the area for 3 months. And the cars had to park in the compounds for long, and half of the cars couldn't be moved away because the drivers, the owners of the cars, were locked down in the quarantine area. So that's how the disaster started. And the firefighters couldn't really approach the building to put the fire down. All those details was reported and shared by people on WeChat. So actually, days before the protest took place, the whole Chinese public has read the video, had read the recounts and watched the small videos that showing how people were desperately asking for help when they were locked up at home. So that is a trigger to this massive protest in the country. It's like everybody has such a strong empathy. They will imagine, they will ask themselves, if this happened to their building, what could they do? They can do nothing. So go back to your question. If you watch the whole society and how they suffer, many examples to show people lost their jobs, business had to shut down, restaurants couldn't be open. Sometimes they are open, but immediately if there's one positive case identified in the nearby area, the whole area has to be shut down. Everybody has to go into a long line to get your virus test. And that happens every day. Every day, on a daily basis, people has to spend hours waiting in the line to get their virus test. If you are negative, you're fine, but you still have to show your health code everywhere you go. And if you tested positive, you will be facing first, immediately sent into some quarantine centers, or any people who have contact. And secondly, everybody who has contact with you will be forced to be house quarantined, and the whole residence building will be shut down. The whole area will be shut down, and the whole city will be locked down, as what happened to Shanghai. Imagine this in your mind. So whatever, if after 3 years of such, massive lockdown and a desperate life, people lost hope for a lot of what we say stability and the security outlook, then of course they will make to the streets. So go back to your question. I was surprised when I hear people loudly and publicly shouted out those slogans, political slogans. Those are the words you've never ever heard in that country over the past 33 years. After Tiananmen Square pro-democracy movement, which took place in 1989, nobody, it's a widely acknowledged fact that nobody dares or is allowed to speak loud like that. So I was surprised when I hear the slogans like "Step Down CCP," Xi Jinping stepped down. Those are the words I really were surprised about. But it asked me, am I surprised to find people are so angry and they gather together? I'm not that surprised. And the second question I want to follow up, why this is shocking and why people have to watch the videos online, there's no announcement. Everything took place basically like a breaking news. Only two things we knew already beforehand. One is that a visual candle gathering in Chengdu. So there's a small poster circulated on the social media just showing Chengdu residents, we will find this spot in the area 9-something p.m. Let's stay together and the moon commemorate the deaths of those Xinjiang people who were killed in the big fire. So that shows this this protest in Chengdu was spontaneous. It's like protest itself was spontaneous, but the vigil, the gathering, were somehow planned as a way for people to stay together and to show their empathy and the sympathy and to talk about this big fire. And they try to stop it. They try to call to the government saying, easy this COVID control policy, let's go back to normal life and listen to what we think about the policy. Another fact we knew before the protest took place on the campus were students. There's a lot of videos already showed students past 3 years. University students also were the group that have suffered the whole quarantine policy most. Many of them, imagine you're a junior, imagine you're a freshman in 2020. And now in 3 years, you spend all your time at home, study online. Some of the kids, many of them, they say they've never had any group activities with classmates. They even don't know what their classmates look like. And they've never talked to their professors in person. So, but students can still try to stay together and try to share these feelings. And if you are studying on campus, you probably cannot leave your dormitory for months. So there are videos showing students before they stood up and hold that white paper, blank paper to voice out. There are already videos showing either students manage to take a walk on playground together, or they crawl on the ground together. So there are some small scale gatherings among students on campus. So I'll stop here. I know you have more questions, but
well, the thing is, how do you explain this politicization that students? You posted one tweet that actually I laughed a bit. When it's normal in non-democratic countries, it's normal when there is a protest, normal, of course, inverted commas, to accuse protesters of being foreign agents. And you posted that students said that the only foreign agents are Marx and Engels. So how do you explain this politicization of the protest? Do you see that this politicization will go further, or you think that the protest will be now stifled as it has already started? From what I understand, since the symbol of the student protest is white A4 piece of paper, because there is no freedom of expression, now you cannot get A4 white paper. It's a problem. Could you elaborate on that?
Okay, let me try. What's your first question? So as a
the politicization of students.
Okay. I have to say, it's too early to predict what's next. Everything is still took place so quickly. I can tell you what's going on now. Several points. One is last night, local time, New York time, which means just yesterday. The head of Ministry of Public Security, which basically the chief police officer in China, he has held this nationwide, national level meeting that announced that they will take ultimate efforts to put down any unease and what's the word? The riots. Any social movements recently took place in the public will be harshly put down. So that's the latest announcement from the authorities, from the government. And it's from the chief of police officer. But before this official announcement came out, what we've heard online or shared by the participants, young students mostly, they said there's a massive investigation going on the campus that is to find out who are the participants. And this is conducted by the school authorities. So teachers were trying to find out who organized those, who are the students that made to the streets. And some of them were taken away. So the investigation on how many people were taken away, with what allegation, are these students and allowed to meet their family? No way to meet their family, but are they allowed to talk to anybody if they are put into custody? None of those information is blank. Any of those information is blank. This is on campus. On the streets, what we've seen is those spots in the major cities where the protest took place were already guarded and rounded up by a massive number of police cars. So you see a significant increase of police officers patrolling in the major areas in those big cities. Streets are now empty. There are small video clips people post in a very low-key, very quiet way, showing if you take a bicycle and go to Urumqi Street on Shanghai, where the protest took place. The streets are empty and they're rounded up. They are by the all kinds of,
So was it, is the movement over? Is this wave of protests over?
Too early really too early to answer you this question. If this part, we can go back to history, and if you study China's history, especially this political movement history, what's happened in June 4th, or what's happened in Hong Kong. I was in Hong Kong, so I experienced the whole process of this, Hong Kong has seen months of protests, and is widely participated. Half of the city population took to the streets. But the massive investigation, retaliation, putting back to order action is still going on in Hong Kong, in the city. So usually the procedure will be, they need to quickly decide and discuss internally what they would do. And the decision has to be made by Xi Jinping himself. So everybody was waiting to him. They're waiting for his decision. That actually explained why in the first 1 or 2 days you didn't see police officers took any extreme actions to put just students down. But from yesterday on, we can see Shanghai officers, police officers, they check phones on the streets. And then I said this official statement say we will put down any movements like this. So
in other words, Xi has made a decision what to do.
We don't know. He didn't speak, but he would only tell his team, and then I believe they've already made up primary decision, but it's going on. You see all the riots movements in other countries. So what we can see is authorities, police authorities, the whole entire system is trying to do three things. First, stop people from talking about it, from sharing any information. They need to stop contagious. They need to stop contagious impact. They need to stop people from further knowing what's happening. And secondly, they need to make sure the precautions measures are taken so no such thing could happen next time. And then third, it's about the punishment and the penalty on the leaders and the organizers. So in Chinese, they say you kill the kitchen, so you terrify monkeys. you pick some leaders, so you terrify the whole public. This is going on. So a lot of legal procedures, legal issues we haven't talked about. No lawyers step in now, but lawyers already start to say, if there are any people who are taken away and were arrested, we're going to offer support. But very quickly, those human rights lawyers who show the intention to help will be harassed and punished and warned not to step in. So this is going on. To answer your question, really too early to say. Okay. But one thing is clear. If they continue this zero COVID policy, and if they refuse to relax the whole society, such things, people will continue to be frustrated, desperate, and the normal life will never be back. Then imagine if you are in that situation, what you do. You wanna, because if another big fire, happens in another city, what people would do. That's the thing. So what we see is from I haven't really got a time because of the time difference. I haven't really go through this, but Guangzhou yesterday, local time, Guangzhou authorities has already announced this massive lockdown control policy was removed. They say Guangzhou quarantine period is over. And it's also funny because if you first announce the city has to go into emergency situation because of the pandemic, how could you announce the virus is gone overnight? So that once again proved to the public, and everybody now knows, it's nothing to do with medical. It's nothing to do with pandemic anymore. It's all about how the authorities, officials, especially Xi, decide what to do with this zero COVID policy. So we'll see. We'll see. Politically, socially, economically, there are a lot of factors that become the variables that decide if there are protests going on or people were terrified and go back home and never speak up. I don't think so. I don't think so.
I have three other very quick questions, and then we can reply to the chat question in the chat, and of course live questions. Well, one is, since a lot of people in the group are journalists, I understand that I also see that international media is basing their analysis on citizens' videos. Does it can journalists in China right now, or in past days, international and national, can they travel to these places where protests are taking place, or all the information relies on citizens' videos? That is one question. Another question, and I have to mention, they come from Philip Noble, who we see here, who is a big China expert, also Vivian's friend who lived for many years in China. He also mentioned, and I would like to ask you about the protests of the Chinese students in front of foreign embassies. That's not common, because we know that Chinese intelligence services control the diaspora. So how do you explain that? And third, what also Philip suggests, I have to say, is this relationship between the central government and the local government. Is it easy now for Xi to say it's all the problem of local governments, or if they loosen the measures locally, they can have problems with Beijing? Let's try to do it sort of by points, and then I would like to ask the audience to ask questions. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll try to be faster. Okay, first question, can journalists go to the places to report? Imagine two bigger points. For the domestic media, Chinese media, I've made the speech here with you guys, colleagues. Chinese media has never been censored and controlled as it is now, ever. That means the entire institutional media system in China was, we can say, finished. That's a strong word. That means state media has almost 95% become the propaganda mouthpiece machine. You won't find any critical narratives. You won't find any stories in written or in video that show any dissent with this COVID zero policy. No, there's no critical reports on Chinese media. This is due to she during the past 10 years, China has implemented a really, really strict, systematic censorship campaign that remove all the provocative journalists, commercially paralyzed those media outlets. You used to find some liberal-minded journalists, so they can still do this investigative stories that are critical of all kinds of stories on the social issues, but you won't find any critical pieces on Chinese media in Chinese language. And for the international media, what's happened is this: first, foreign correspondents couldn't get accreditation, meaning you are not legally allowed to report in China if you are not affiliated with any international media, which is allowed to get you license to work in China. You need accreditation in order to be reporting in China. So foreign correspondents are leaving the country. We find several cases before in the past. Australian journalists, or two journalists, ABC journalists, they had to flee they have to run out of the country because they were harassed by the security police officers. And foreign correspondents, it's very difficult for them to get a visa nowadays. And if you behave too provocative, you're too vocal, then your boss, your employer, will get a warning or protest officially from the foreign affairs ministry and their representatives in your home country. So that happens to BBC, we know. And other, like there are German journalists who were beaten up in Zhengzhou last year, then when they were there to cover the floods. So this chain of harassment and the challenges that international media were facing decides when there's big news like this takes place, there not much the whole media could do. I mean, professional institutional media could do. So go back to your question, citizen journalism, that's not a word to describe the whole reporting dynamic there. Because if you see citizen journalism is about every citizen put up their phone and film it, yes. But are those people are working as journalists on their basic daily life? That's how we describe citizen journalists, right? No, they are just ordinary Chinese people because everybody has a phone. And if you I remember you saw the video shown in Beijing. Anybody who lived in Beijing will know that Liangmahe Street is a very commercial spot of Beijing. And the people just drive, they were driving in their cars, passing that spot where people surrounded together and shouted. And then the drivers, they take videos and shout and share and say, be careful. So it's not citizen journalism in that sense, but it's everybody's sharing. That's also another trigger to further protest and further sharing and communication among the public. Is you cannot stop people from using their phone, right? Maybe extreme situation will be one day internet was cut down, so nobody will share any information like what Iran has done. That is possible. It really that's why international media has to use. Everybody has to use this video shared by witnesses. Also, is because it's not pre-announced. So journalists, it's very hard for editors to deploy. You cannot, so if you're lucky enough, you pass by, you were there, you were having a coffee, which is impossible because our restaurants were shut down. So even such pass by at a witness chance were very slight.
Okay, let's speed up. How about this, what Philip asked you about protests in front of the embassies abroad? Just really briefly, because I see the time is running out. I would like the audience. Okay.
Honestly, I don't know how Beijingers participants, they chose the spots. But I know one thing, in Chengdu, you see there's a
No, I'm speaking of the foreign embassies, Chinese embassies abroad.
Yeah. I need to give you some geographic heads up. The gathering, people first gathered in the Liangma River. It's a riverbed. Why so? I believe, I don't know, I didn't ask anybody, because that's outdoor. Remember, people had to wear the mask, so they need to find an open air space that is nice, that's easy to be gathered, not so quickly you will be dispersed by the traffic or guards. So in Chengdu and in Beijing, we both found people gathered in the open air space. And the Liangmahe to Xiyuanli, if you walk, it's just very nearby. It's just a 2 kilometers walk. It's a nice walk. It's nice blocks. And that area is also known for being very commercial, very international.
I don't think we are talking about the same thing. I was referring to the Chinese embassies abroad.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking, I was sorry about, and sorry, misunderstanding. I was thinking that you asked me why people protest in front of the embassies. Okay. I know overseas people protest in front of the embassies. So question is, does it work or no, right?
No, the question is how come? Because, you know, they're also controlled.
It's a clear gesture. It's just people want to take a clear, people want to send a clear message to the Chinese government directly, clearly, openly. We don't agree with you, and we stand with those people who stood up and say no to you. That's it. Because if students and the residents in China, they dare to take to the streets, if you don't stand up in a very public and open style and talk to the authorities, you won't send the most clear and powerful message through. I think that's why they, if they are afraid of any surveillance and monitoring, I think yes and no. There's a saying, fear does not carry on, courage carry on. It's like contagious, right? We talk about an infection. So people need to talk to themselves and talk to each other, say, you're afraid, I'm afraid, it's okay if we stand together, we're not that afraid.
Thank you. I'll have to speed up because I see the time flies. So I shall read, please raise your hands if you want to comment something with Vivian. I will read this question here from Joe Morley Davis, Albany Associates. You mentioned, I read, that she's likely response will be further censorship and repression, but this undermines the CCP's ability to keep their finger on the pulse. Could this blindness impact decision-making on other policy areas beyond zero COVID, leading to less predictable behavior?
It's a very sophisticated question. Let me try to answer. I think also Philip just now asked us a question quite similar. I want to answer both of them. Is if there is any differentiation between the central and the local governments, and to say if she likely response will be further censorship and repression, will this undermine the ability to keep their fingers on the pulse? I think if you study China politics in a rational way, I mean, as it is, if we look at China case in a political science style, that's a conclusion very naturally, because you see from the history, from the examples from other society, none of the government, any dictatorship government lasts forever, right? If you don't maintain your legitimacy and you don't really serve your people, you don't get the support from the people you're governing, you're ruling, it won't last forever. It's just always just a matter of time. But what we have to say is like she has never become, she basically is the most powerful China state leader since 1949, after Mao and Deng Xiaoping. And Mao Zedong is his idol. He is firmly believing, he still believes he can be a great state leader that puts prosperity and well-being back to this country and make China the biggest country, the best country in the world, that shows to the Western world that we can find a way. We don't have to follow all your Western pattern of democracy and the political governance. He's very assured he can put everything under control, and he's showing to the Chinese people that he's a great leader. He cares about people. But there are so many irrational elements in his rhetoric, his rhetoric and his way of governance. So what we see over the past 3 years, so local governments, local authorities are also weakening because he is the only one that makes decisions. He's the only one, and no challenge, no criticism, no debates, even on the policy level. So if if he decides to put control and suppression the whole society, can the society bear that? Can the mechanism, the dynamic itself really work to maintain this way of modern of governance? Of course, answer is very clear, no. But if you say if the local authorities will become like a disobedient force that somehow even supports and give some supporting dynamic to the protest, I won't say so, because putting down CCP, I don't think that's the agenda for majority of Chinese people. How many people wants to put down CCP? We don't know. But you say, do they agree with the policies? No, none of them agree with the zero, not none of them. Majority of the Chinese people disagree with zero COVID policy, but will this protest to say people make to the streets so they want to replace CCP? No. So the conclusion shouldn't be made so easily. So I would suggest, look at China case, but don't expect that uprising will quickly lead to a revolution and the replacement of Communist Party as a ruling party.
I think that what you're revealing, and then I'll read the next questions, are basically two things. One, in dictatorships, there is one discourse you have at home, and there is another thing that you have in public. So it's very difficult to predict what is going to happen because you don't know what is happening where. And from the little I know about China, my Chinese friends, when they speak of time, they have a different sense of time than in Western Europe. They speak of 10 years, 100 years, etc. Here, there is sort of a sense that every 4 years something can happen, like the elections. If there are no elections, the time has another meaning. That's my feeling. But I would like to read the question of Katarina Chovanchakova from the Slovak radio, the chief editor. She writes, the chief editor of Politico Europe wrote, young people in China don't know about Tiananmen Square protests and massacre, and that is the reason why they don't expect police brutality. Do you agree with that? Do Chinese young people not expect to be arrested and persecuted?
Actually, that piece written by Jamel Andolini. We were colleagues in Beijing many years ago. So he was in Hong Kong, I was in Hong Kong, so I know him very well. I read his article yesterday. I disagree with him. I didn't get a chance to argue with him. I agree with part of his argument. If you read his article saying because of the censorship, because of systematic blindness of the Tiananmen Square massacre, students are unknown. So there's an implicative message showing students are too young, sometimes simple, and sometimes naive. So that's the implication I read from the article. I would say if you think in this way, you see young Chinese people are getting more courageous and more reasonable. That also shows, even though the brainwash, this censorship on the truth of history might bring some ignorance, meaning not in the literacy sense, meaning you probably don't know how they do with the students. But if you are exposed to the reasonable knowledge that train you into a citizen as you're supposed to be, you live in freedom, meaning you are free from fears, which stop you from speaking up like humans. You find my logic. It's like these young people, they don't know what this government has done. They have shut down students on the streets. So of course you can say they're ignorant. You don't know how evil this authority could be if they decide to crack down. You could also say, oh, these are the fearless kids that's supposed to be. people are not supposed to be, people not supposed to live in fears. They're supposed to live in the dreams and ideals, even though you can call them naive. So I won't draw a conclusion saying because the students are too naive, so they made to the streets and they probably will regret what they've done. It's not logic. I believe, according to what I read, many of those students, many of them, because some of them, they managed to talk to the people. They read enough. They all know Tiananmen Square. They all watch documentary. I heard in person, online. She was talking. She managed to talk, to go to a clubhouse, and she shared. She said, she said, quote unquote, I watched that 3-hour documentary on Tiananmen Massacre. And if the student said, this is our obligation, we have to do something. That's what we're doing now. To answer your question,
I think so.
To answer that question, I read it. So do Chinese young people not expect to be arrested and persecuted? I would say nobody will say, I'd like to go to jail. Nobody will say, but they know they are doing something bad that even their parents and teachers won't allow. Yeah, but you say, do they really understand what does it mean being arrested? No, but that's their decision, right? That's their decision. So don't imagine they're too young, too naive, too simple. Yes, probably, yes. But there are people who decide to not to be so afraid of.
Thank you very much, Vivian. If there are no more questions, I'm going to ask Philip, who I know has many questions and who knows a lot about China. Philip, unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mariana. It's a delight to see you, Vivian. And really, I appreciate it very much. I have to say your coverage on Twitter, also being bilingual, because not everybody speaks Chinese. And we really need to hear it from a Chinese perspective, including in English. And so my question, because we at Global Voices focus very much on issues of context, but also narratives, and narratives who come from the country, from outside the country. So I will quote a very, Western, a cliche statement that I personally hate and drives me mad, which is that, I will quote, that's not my opinion, people in China do not care about politics or human rights. They will, never rebel. And of course, what we have seen and what we still see inside of China, but also abroad, says that this assessment is wrong. So I have a huge question, but maybe you can help at least kind of guide us, how can we actually change this very annoying and simplistic Western narrative about, Chinese people being passive and not interested in politics? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you make very, sophisticated question too. Let me try to elaborate. Several layers of thinking. One is China, that's a cliche. China is so huge and it's so diverse and it's so complicated. Actually, during my 20 years of interaction with the international community, and as a storyteller, I have been first frustrated, then understanding why this happens, and then I decide, okay, there is something that we can do. Why I'm frustrated? Because that's a huge mistake, but I'm not criticizing here. It's like when the Western world, when the outside world look at China, they follow a certain pattern of analytic and interpretative language. That's in, and so you look at China out of a certain pattern of theories. I don't say theories are not right. They are right because they are the accumulation of people's knowledge based on the experience in other countries. But China is so different and so complicated. But of course, Chinese government had this cliche too. A lot of supporters and their propaganda say, because China is different, you don't understand us. So if you are not here, you don't speak language, don't put your fingers on this. This is also very stupid. It's like they would say, what I would suggest is like really, there's the political science theories that study China based on other countries' experiences. I happen to have a degree of comparative political science. So one argument I made on the class, even to those professors, is like not every country can be compared. I mean, in this comparative analytic level. So even though you are describing the same thing, you see this people on the streets, they're chanting political slogans. If there's a protest, if there's an uprising, so in your mind, because your mirror cases will be those street movements you see in your country. If this is essentially the same thing, yes and no. So maybe the formula, maybe the behaviors look similar, but the trigger reasons, the dynamics, the mechanisms, the facts are not that similar. So be careful. I'm not stopping people trying to analyze China. I think more effort should be done to just look at China cases, listen to the people, and study their language, their political mindset. But I also want to say, even though it's so difficult and complicated, this recent protest case showed to us there are huge number of Chinese people who want exactly the same thing as human being, as everybody in the world. So it's the government, it's she, and also CCP try to emphasize that China is so different, but people are the same. They are humans. I always make a joke. As long as people are not pigs, you share the same feelings, you share the similar physical organs. So if people want freedom, they want freedom. It's not like because they are living in this country, because they are ruled by CCP, because they are fed happily by the government, then they change their minds and decide to leave like some other species. It's not like that. So I would say there are a lot of similarity. If you look at this individual cases, you study on the human level, but the political governance and the political analytic system and the rhetoric used by the journalism has to be updated, has to be more sophisticated. And how to change it? Okay, second question. I think I have tried to answer this. People in China don't care about politics of human rights and will never rebel. I would say I lived in many countries. I will make a decision. I will make a conclusion. You can correct me if I was wrong. In every society, there are people who say, I don't care about the politics, but there will be political news animals, and there will be news animals. It's the same in China. You'll find I have a lot of friends who live in this news as I do, because they care about the public issues, and anything could be public, could be political. I always say everything is political. So when people make announcements, say I don't care about politics, maybe just a self-protection rhetoric, or they just think they are not supposed to care about politics, or they just don't know how to care about political issues. So but if this political issues is about if you can get out of your home, if you can go to restaurant, if your kids can go to school normally, if your kids have to wear the mask forever, it's not politics. It's not political issues. It's the social basic human rights. So as long as you're humans, you care about it. So I would say how many people in China really care about political? Maybe among the Chinese population, not so many participants as you can see in Europe countries or in America, because everybody, people need to be trained in order to participate and need to have chance to be trained. If you can vote every 2 years and 4 years, of course you have this experience. But imagine people have never had a chance to know how to vote. So if they're not trained, they're not given the opportunities, how you blame them saying they don't know how to participate. But now we see there are people speak up the same political slogans as any protest you see on the streets in other countries do. So you can say at least there are people. How many of them? I think they are minor, but remember they're always majority of the silence.
Thank you very much. We have about 3 minutes. I want to read another, and this was really a perfect context. All our events are about the context. Dorina Pasha Salzburger Nachrichten, it's an Austrian newspaper. Do you think that there is a face-saving way for Xi Jinping out of the zero COVID strategy, or would be any change of the policy would be seen as a sign of weakness?
Very good. I think it's also good to give you a heads up to watch. They're in a dilemma. According to many analysis study on Xi's personality, he wants to behave strong and tough, but he's not that silly that he never draw back. But if he withdraw, then that shows his weakness. He's not ultimately mighty, powerful. So that's his dilemma. If if he tries to make sense, and you will see there will be a relaxation on the zero COVID policy, then that will lead to the weakness of his glory image as a person never makes mistakes. But then nobody makes no mistakes. So it depends. But then another argument will be people worry that if there is a temporary relaxation on the policy, then most of people will be happy, go back to normal life. Then China will never see changes that, for democracy, for changes of regime. This is about the resilience. There's a theory called the why CCP is so resilient, because they know sometimes they need to draw back, sometimes they have to take some softened policy changes. Both are possible, but according to what we study on Xi, look at how he deals with Americans boycott policies measures. But look at how he deals with European countries. If you're soft, he thinks, okay, easy to hush you up. But if you're very tough, and he has to calculate the stakes he has to shoulder in order to pick that battle. So I hope he can make more reasonable decisions, and at least don't make people suffer and die in the big fires.
Well, with this sentence, I would like to end. We do hope people don't die in fires, and we also hope one day democracy comes. But in China, things take a long time, and not only there. So we have to think in historical terms. For the third time, you are our wonderful explainer of Chinese reality. And all I can say as a conclusion is, please follow Vivian on Twitter. It is Vivian Wu Beijing, because there are several Vivian Wu Beijing. Follow her Twitter. She is a great explainer of the events in China. And we have to be patient and see what is happening on the ground, because many articles that I have read seem to have reflected like wishful thinking. The revolution has started. And one more time, you have showed that what really matters is understanding the local context. It can be very, often it can be very different from the international wishful thinking. I thank you so much, Vivian. I thank you so much, Philip. And maybe Daniela, I don't know if she wants to say something. And not, I wish you, I wish you all the best. And until soon, we shall continue following the events in China. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Vivian.
Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.